think this is an important chapter, especially when we get into like a user form. But in this case, we're going to start with our message box and show you some of the variations of that. Let me just go through the book and show you what's there. Then we'll go through and write some code to do it. The basic format for the message box is, the simple format would be something like this. It's just message box with one parameter, which actually just puts it in the message box right there. The other options would be, see, here's another option here, which is message box with a parenthesis around it. This way. Now this would be used, this style would be used if you were putting things in variables. So you have to put parentheses around it for variables. The options here, you could actually put in message box and say the prompt is equal to the prompt that goes in the middle of the box. The title is equal to the title, and then the buttons, you can put in a button. You can put in the actual parameter names, and that's equal to, and then specify the parameter. So this is an example of that, is you can put in hello world and the buttons and the title. So it looks like it did the order. Doesn't seem to matter. As long as you have the names in there, it will do it. If you don't use the names, you could put these three parameters without any prompts at all. But this one is the first parameter. This one is the second parameter, and the buttons is the third parameter. That's all you need, is those three parameters. But any other variations of that, you're going to have to actually tell it what you're actually trying to do. Okay. So let's look at a few of these first. See, here's the straight example here, which is, looks like it goes backwards on that. So it looks like it's the prompt in the middle of the box, the button you're going to be using, and then the message on top. Now these buttons, here's a moment here. The buttons are down here. So this is the information button, that little graphics image that pops in it. Here's your X, or some sort of critical message. There's a question mark you can put up there, a warning. Then here's also an exclamation point. So those are the three icons you can stick in the middle here, which is that VB command you can put in. So let's go through this for you. So I think, let me see what file I want to open up here first. Top of the chapter, I usually tell you this. It's worksheet. Open, then we're going to open up a worksheet. Worksheet. Because what's that? Right, so we're just going to, we don't really need a whole lot for this, but we will when we start doing some logical statements. So let's open up our VB and come over to my worksheet, insert a module. We will write some code. So I'll just simply say sub, and I'll say my test. And I'll simply say MSG box. And I put in my three parameters, my double quote hello world, which will appear in the center of the box. My VB command, which is going to be, there's a VB critical. There's a critical one there. Looks like we have information. Here's an exclamation point. Whatever button you want to stick in there, comma. And then we can put in the message on top. So double quote, message on top. That's essentially the three parameters. Now I could put in here prompt equals, and I can put in the prompt this way if I wanted to. But if you're using just those three parameters, then you can just put them in this order, and then it will recognize it and actually put it in. I'm just going to run it, and all it's going to do is put in the message on top, hello world, and puts my icon in the icon there. And that's essentially all this does. And it's just sort of a final state. If you put in a lot of text in here, it just simply grows accordingly. See, it just kind of keeps expanding a little bit. There is a point we're going to talk about in a little bit where you can actually do a return here, a carriage return, and put this on 2 rows if the text is too long or something. Well, essentially, it's just a prompt that's going to say, this is the answer, or this is the result, or I'm looking at this information. I use the message box a lot to status things to see if something works. I did that earlier with the row command. Remember, I said, well, tell me what row I'm on. And so I just put a quick message box in there to make sure that the command I was using was going to extract or give me the information I was looking for. And so you could use that message box as a real quick test to make sure it's going to pull the right answer out, and then you can go from there. All right, so let's look at some variations of this. We talked about the prompt. You can put in the name in there too, but let's just move on a little bit. Of course, we have message, default message here. These are the information box, the red circle box, and you just change this out right here for each one of these. VB critical, there's a VB question, a VB exclamation. Those are the different boxes we can use. Add return lines. You want to put those on 2 rows. You can use this VB CRLF. I think you can use this to VB, I said that up here. See, I said you can also use this VBLF. LF is a line feed, and the CRLF is a carriage return line. And I think it's pretty much the same command. And Word is the difference between an enter key and then a shift enter. But you can use the concatenation feature to concatenate these 2 text streams together and put the line feed in between the 2. So we come back to the same code that we were just looking at. And if I put in my line feed in here, I can simply put in, I'll put hello world, and then I'll put in my double quote and %, double quote. I'll put in my VB, so here's my VBCR, and the other one I used was the VBCRLF. So either one of these seems to work. That's just a carriage return, that's all that is. And then we're going to put another and %, and then we can put a double quote. So this information here is going to be underneath of this hello world. And we can do that in conjunction with, this is the second parameter, because this is the comma that separates it. So it will recognize this whole thing as the first parameter. And if I run it, see, it puts hello world in the first level, and then all this stuff is the second text line. Then you can put a third one and a fourth one if you want to. So if you've got a little message you want to provide of the reason why they're getting this prompt, maybe you have an error condition, and you want to specify why they're getting there, and you want to put a little message in there, explain to them what to do, then you can go through and put that in a couple of rows rather than having it string out and stretch that thing out really far. I believe that it gets really, really large, it will wrap to another row. So I will go through and try that out and just put in this. See what happens. I did wrap it. So it wrapped automatically where the break was. If you don't use that line break, you want to break it at a certain point, you could use the line break, or you can just let it wrap. If it's a sentence you're putting in there, and that way you can just do it from that perspective. So that's the line feed. I think it's really important to be able to put a line feed in there to be able to put something, some statement in there. So I think these message box are pretty useful for the information purposes. Here's your line continuation. Now the line continuation is this little tilde mark here. See a little tilde right there? I put this in there because this is something that a lot of people have had an interest in. So if I come down here and put in this, and I wanted this message on top to be on the second row, it wouldn't work. See it? So it's got to be all in the same row. But if I come over here and put in my underscore like this, then that will consider this as a continuation character. So if it's really, really super long, then you might want to just put a little continuation character here and then continue the code on this line. Let's run this and see if it's going to work. See, it did consider it to be one code, one line of information, which put it up. See? So this is your little continuation. I did that once in the original book I wrote. I'd used that, but I didn't explain what it was. So that's why I thought I would add that in there as an actual command piece. And I used it several times in the code, but I didn't really. And I also noticed that when you cut and paste code, if I were to cut all this code out, it doesn't sort of recognize that continuation character. So you have to kind of retype it. So, and I also had problems with the double quotes, which I replaced them all with this special double quote. So when you cut and paste, it will not come across correctly. Input to a cell. This means I want to pull information from a cell and put that information in the message box. And I kind of did that earlier too. So you just put in the command in here, concatenate whatever else you want to add in there. But you can pull things from an active cell or something like that. But what we did earlier was the active row. Remember, whichever row or column it was on, we use that command. So we can try that. There's also a yes and no. So we'll do this in a second. There's also a yes and no message. So the yes and no simply says, do you like pizza? And you use the VB yes, no command. And it will come back and say, do you like pizza, yes or no? Now this doesn't really do anything. All it does is ask you the question and assumes that it doesn't really do anything with the answer. So then the next piece of this is looking at a variable assignment. So this is a button called a button bar. And you have to declare it with this message result. And then you can put that in as a button bar here. And that means it will actually, that we have to use the parenthesis. You can put in your parameters in here, and the answer for the yes and no will go into this thing called this button bar. And then the button bar, you can do some logic and say, well, if it's true, then we want to do something. See, so you can prompt them for yes and no questions. Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to format this? Are you sure you want to delete this value? And you can prompt them and say yes or no. If it's yes, then go ahead and delete it. If somebody's trying to delete something using some code, then you can question whether they want to do that or not. Let's go through and run through a few yes and no's. We'll do some variable assignments. And I also want to do this one here, which just did it earlier, but I'll do it again. So in this case, if you click on Smith right here, and you want to pull that into the VB code, I can simply say, instead of putting in hello world, I'll just put in active cell, active cell dot value I'm going to pull that name into the message box. And then I can simply put an ampersand on here. I'll say Smith S is the selected salesperson, or the top salesperson. Put in that one. I can also put in here my line feed, so the top salesperson would be underneath of the name. So I can put my VB CR and ampersand here. So I can put that as a second line. So it's going to pull the active cell out and say this is the top salesperson. So pull Smith out and put it on a second row, and this is the top salesperson. So we also will do some yes and no's. So I can simply say if I can put in that prompt that says, but the answer I had to you, like pizza, comma, and then we can put our VB yes or no. Now there's a whole bunch of yes and no. There's a VB okay cancel, there's an OVB okay only, there's a question, I don't know what the question is, but then there's a yes and no cancel, so there's quite a few in here, different styles of yes and no's. So that's simply all you have to do. So I will run that. And so do you like pizza, yes or no? You say yes, it goes from there. So in this case, it's not really doing anything, it's just sort of asking you the question, making you feel good that it's actually asking you something. Right, so there we have for this. And now to put this into a parameter, we have to look at the code so we can verify we get it correctly. And that's why this is really critical, this right syntax and all this stuff. So in this case, we're going to come down to this variable assignment. See, we have to put in this dim. You have to declare the button bar, and then you assign the result of the message box to the button bar. And then you can do it through and evaluate the button bar. So I can actually select this code and make it go a little quicker. Put that right here. And I can say, now I have everything sort of written for me already. So it says here, do you like pizza? So, and that's going to be a yes or no. And the answer of that is going to go into this thing called button bar. And then if button bar is equal to yes, then we want to do something. See? Then we can actually click on A1, it looks like, and we're going to put the word yes in there. Otherwise, if it's not equal to yes, if it's yes, then put A1. If it's no, then put it in A1. So put it in either way. Okay, so let's put a couple of spaces here so we can see the code a little better. Run it. Do you like pizza? Yes. Yes here. Then it's going to put yes in A1 and drop out at that point. We do it again. I put no. Then it's going to drop out. Put no in there. Drop out the code. So again, it's a little bit different style format, and knowing this is key too. So Dad, if you'll remember this, I never remember it, this actual VB message box result. I wouldn't remember that off the top of my head, but so you have to kind of look at find out what the syntax is for this, and then you can use it pretty effectively. All right. Did you do a couple of those things? Did you try some of that?
Yeah, I followed along.
Yeah, good. So here it says, message box, do you wish to be bold? Yes or no? And then it's going to come back and say, if it's yes, then we want to format it. Font cell is true. But then down here, I'm going to ask him again. I ask him twice, basically. Are you sure you want to do this? If you say no, then it's going to come back and say, oh, you're sure you don't want to format? So it's going to come back as a secondary question. It's kind of like if you delete something, okay? Do you want to delete this, yes or no? Are you sure you want to delete it? Yes or no? See, because
this is a permanent delete. Are you sure?
Yeah, this is the primary key field. Are you sure you want to delete the person's name and their social and all their information? Yes or no?
No.
We verify that, you know? They may have actually hit the wrong button or not known what they were doing. But when they get asked twice, then they're going to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe they're asking me this for a reason, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So get this out. Looks like we're going to be doing this in where? Just whatever, just ask you if you want to format, whatever the active cell is, you see. So whatever we have active cell, we're going to ask these questions. It's going to be bold, basically. I should change that to delete, because that really makes more sense, right? Let's come down here and paste it. And I'll just run it. And I'll select on Smith, as you can see there. So it comes back and says, okay. In fact, we have a go to tag here. And this says, are you sure you want it to be bold? And if I say, no, I don't want it to be bold, then it's going to come back and ask me a second time, are you sure you don't want it? You say, yes, or are you sure? Yes, I'm sure that I don't want it to be bold, right? And then it should drop out. And it drops out. It drops the end. Okay. This time you say you want it to be bold. I'll say no. This time I'll use the other one. Yes, I'm sure. See, no, wait. No. What's going to happen? Does it make it bold? I'm not sure if it did or not. Go to 10. Oh, then it's going to go back and ask me again. See? Okay, interesting. So, yeah, I can maybe change this one to be delete because that's much more sense. You sure you want to delete this? Yes or no? You're sure? You know, type thing. So that would be a little adjustment I make to that at some point. All right, so that's kind of the idea that you could have it ask questions in that nature. All right, so let's move on. And we also have an example here where it comes back and says, trying to make it bold, looks like, similar type of thing. Now, down here, there's a couple other options, and I think there's a lot of options associated with this, but I didn't really put them all in here. You have the OK, the cancel, ignore, and all this stuff. Here's a right and left justification. You could make it right or left justified. I think you can make it center justified too. Again, you can go through it. That is really all I wanted to touch on. We have a little exercise here, but we can skip that because they're going to get the idea. Input boxes are probably important. So it looks like I'm going to open up just a blank sheet here, it looks like. And we're going to provide some input boxes. And so the format for the input box is simply the word input box. And then you put in the same as the message box. You put a message and then the title bar if you want to put that in there. But it's going to come back and ask you something, see? So you put in your whatever you want to ask them here. Then they type in the answer here. And then when you say OK, then it actually does something at that point. Let's move on a little bit. So here's how you define it. So you can say, I'm going to say the range A1 value, and then I'm going to go to the input box, and I'm going to put, again, I've used this parenthesis style. What do you want to say? And you can type in something, and the answer is going to go into the range 1 input box. So you could use variables here too, but in this case, we're going to go directly to the cell A1. So I'll just do this. Watch it run. I'm just going to set a blank sheet, so I have a blank sheet here. And I will here, drop this down. Okay, input box 2. You want to say, it's good. So here's my input box. Say test and say OK. Now if I hit cancel, it shouldn't do anything. It dropped out, see? So if I push yes or type OK, then it should put that into that cell. That's really all it does. And so that's probably important. Now you could create variables, like I said, and do this. So here's your input box, personal details, enter the name here. So you can actually put in the text. So here's your personal details on the top. Here's enter your name here. And then down here, you can put like a sample name. See, so this enter name here, that would put the text in that little box. And then you would be able to give them an example. Say, so where do you put the information at? Oh, you put them in here, okay? Type here, type name here, something like that. That one. Like I said, we get through quite a bit of code just by cutting and pasting the stuff. and just walking through the logic. So here we go. Go to. So this is the input box. It puts the name, and it puts enter name here. So it gives you a default text is what it does. And so if I say okay here, then it's actually going to put this in. That's the answer it's going to give it. So you may or may not want to do that. Like for example, if you put the word department here, HR department, then if they don't answer that question, then everybody's going to become the HR department. See? So if you have something like an input box like that. So this doesn't do anything at this point. It just simply prompts you for that information. So stop this, then go look at some more. Looks like you can put specific positions in here. These coordinates are considered pixel locations, and it really depends on the resolution of the screen. So if you have a high resolution screen, I think this 2000 is going to be a different position than if you have a low resolution screen. So a little bit questionable in terms of pretty much standard with the size of how the computers are set up, then it's fine. But in this case, you can put in these physical locations. So let's just do this, and we can show you where this actually appears on the screen. And then we can make some changes to it to see if we can move it somewhere else. I believe this is more up in the corner. So I'll just go over to here. So here is your position. So it puts it in that particular spot. So if I change that now to put maybe another 0 on here, run it again. See, it must have put it somewhere off the screen, see? That was a little bit too big, it looks like. So I'll change it to maybe 8,000 instead of 20,000, 8,000. So there's 8,000. So there's 8,000. So that went from 2,000 to 8,000 here. So it put it way down off the screen somewhere. So take it for what it's worth, I mean, usually it just puts it in the middle of the screen by default. And so that's probably the best approach. But if you want it to appear a specific spot where the data is that you're looking for, then maybe that would help out for that purpose. Okay, so that is that particular piece. Now this one here looks like it's put into a specific range. So we've done that before, and I put my continuation, it looks like. This is actually collecting the data. See, it's collecting the information, message text, title bar. It actually asks you for this information, and then it collects it, and then it does it all at one time. So here's my input box, and then it's defining these variables. Then it puts the variables in here instead of the actual text. And that way you can maybe change this and change the variables or pull the variables from the database, and then you can put them in there. You can also probably put in here like active cell or something like that too. But then when we're all done, it simply just says message box X, here's X, and then look like it's going to display the results of that X. So just another variation of this that I kind of went through. This one here is more of a logical statement that simply says, if the name that you entered here, this name here, if you didn't enter anything, you didn't enter your name. And then you could, at that point, have it drop either back to the top using the go-to or something like that, and ask them again to enter their name. You can check to see if it's null or not. And so that may be a method you might want to use. Otherwise, if they get canceled, then it drops out of it. You can maybe have some method like that where you can say if it's canceled, then drop out. If it's okay, then you didn't enter the name. You need to enter the name in order to do that. So it's a little check type thing to make sure that they entered the name properly. Okay, and this one here is it's like you're putting all this information to my name. See, it's putting the answer of the input box into my name, and then it's simply putting my name out on the sheet. So again, it's important for you to know what these commands are, because that is the core that we use in every single code to some degree, and then we just add these new commands on here. It makes it a little easier. That's why we spent a little bit more time yesterday going through that. This is another one that actually just looks like it collects the information and then it adds the information. Looks like it does some stuff there. Very similar type of code. All right, limitations. This is, can't select the text. Oh yeah, this is a limitation that I encountered. And this is based on students asking questions too. As you notice that when the input box is open, you can't select the sheet. The sheet is locked at that point. Matter of fact, the entire Excel is locked. I don't think you can do anything. I don't think you can go to anywhere. You can't go to any sheet. So as long as you're in the middle of this prompt here, see, once we're in this prompt, I can't go to Excel. I can't even jump over here. I can't do anything anywhere. So that's the problem. You're sort of locked. And some people don't like this. They want to be able to have the ability to move around in Excel. And so I did come up with a solution for that. There's problems with dates too. And if you have problems with dates, there's a little explanation of one way to go about it. It's looking for a specific date style. If you work with dates a lot. See, what I'm saying here is put it in this style here. This is part of the input, the message of the prompt, is put it in this style and it will have a better chance of recognizing it, okay? So if you put in like 1/2020, then it may not recognize that as a date, so it may do something different, see? So, but when you put them into this 2 letters, 4 letters, then it has a better chance of recognizing it. That field is formatted, then it will work also. It will work. But if it's not formatted, then the system has to recognize the date. And this is just a little workaround that I discovered. Just kind of put this in here in the prompt so that people would be able to do that. Now this is my workaround to the problem. This is called the application input box. And what this does is it allows you to select the screen. So here it says, we're going to open up this thing called employment. And then down in here, we're going to enter the last name, input box, enter the last name here. But what this allows you to do is it allows you to still select the screen. So if I want to see what the names are available, I can still move around in Excel. And then when I'm done, I can actually put this at the bottom of the list. So it puts it the Excel in, offset by 1, and puts the value at the end of the list. So this is application input box. Copy that. And let's come over to the employment. I don't think I thought I had that open. I could say file open, employment. So we want to put information at the end of this list here after this name here. And we'll go to my employment sheet, add a module, that code in, going to declare the last name as a string. It's going to have the application input box, but then when I'm all done, it's going to actually put it at the end of this list. But it gives me the ability to move around still. I come to here, there's my input box. So where the input box before had a problem, now I can actually come over here and actually put this information in like that. I can click on these cells like this. I can move around and switch between Excel. So if I put that actual cell, the Abrams, in there and say OK, it will actually put that at the bottom of the list. See, it actually stuck it there. So it allows me to actually select information in the Excel sheet, put that in the input box, because I don't want to have to spell it. I already have it written here somewhere. I just need to be able to find the right spelling for it, and I can do that. So that was kind of my workaround to that input box style that we had a problem with. And that's kind of cool. I think that's kind of nice to be able to do that, to be able to see what's going on and move around the screen, because maybe I don't really have the answer for this yet. I have to kind of look and see what's out there. Okay. All right, so that's that. Box. Input box. These are some additional parameters. We don't need to go through these right now, but these are options you can put in that defines the input of what it's going to be. So if it's a number, you can put in a type equals 1, and then it would, and you see right here, I put the type right here as part of the parameter. So this kind of forces it to be a number field. If you click on something that's non-number, it will come back with an error and say, this needs to be a number or something like that. It kind of locks you into the data type. So you can specify what kind of data type needs to put in there. So if I put in, I'm looking for a number field and I type in a name, then it might not let me put that name in because it's blocking me from doing that. There's also one in here for, I thought there was one for dates too, but it wasn't. So references, true or false statements, strings, numbers, other formats. This is just the default, which is 0. So there's just a couple little options in there that I discovered with that. So here's one here that says select the last name. Then you can actually put in type 2. That will force it to be a string there. So that will force it to be a string. If you type in a number, it may not work. Let's try that out to see if you type it. If you select a number, see if it will work. So I'll do this here. To my Clement. B. And it's looking, okay, I'll just run it here and see how it, okay, so this is going to look at the input box. It's going to look for a string is what it's looking for. And so if I put in a number in here, like 2, questions, will it work? Did work. Interesting. So it looks like it recognized that as a text string is what it did. And so it still worked, but I wonder if I did a number and I typed in a text string to see what would happen. Let's try the opposite approach. So if I typed in type number is a number, is a 1. So if it's a 1, so it has to be a 1. Type equals 1. Okay. Great. And if I type in test, it has to be a number. So it looks like from a text perspective, and you put in a number, it just says, okay, I'm just going to convert this number to a text string. But it looks like it does work in some cases where it prevents you from actually putting the information in there. So this is false was selected. Right? So that's a couple of things in that area. And there's a couple of, here's some dates. I was playing with dates one time. Put in the date. Looks like, see, I say put in this DD thing again. And that way it does a better job in recognizing it. It looks like I used a number 1. I think 1 is a number style. So, but if you put it as a number style, but you put in a date looking at name, then it sort of does recognize it as a date. All right. So this here might take a good 20, 30 minutes to do. This is probably a really important chapter because the exercises sort of, they build on each other. So what it is, I start with an exercise here, and I show you how to build a user input form. And then I expand upon that. Then I start putting the code in to make the input form function. And then I kind of build upon it. I keep building on the input form and make it more functional. And so essentially what we're going to do is we're going to create an input form, and we're going to have it ask me a whole bunch of information, where the input box is just simply one prompt. It doesn't give me 5 fields. So I can actually go to a database and ask me for all this information. I ask for all this information here, and then when I answer it, it will put those answers on the bottom down here. Where before, we would have asked them 5 times. We'd have asked them for their last name, then another input box would ask them for their first name, another input box would ask them for this. It asks for each one of those individual input boxes. Now we're going to have one input box that's going to have all of them listed. You fill out the form and you say, okay, and it actually saves it off to the sheet. So that's what we're going to look at, is having an input box. So it looks like we're going to create a blank form here. So we're going to open up a blank worksheet, and we're going to create the form on just a blank worksheet. Looks like on this one here, just this test thing. I believe we should use a database for the other one. Here's the user input form. It's located in the VB editor, and then the input menu, and then it's called user form. Let's go over to VB and show you where that's at. So if we just go over to, if you click in a file, I don't care which one, anyone's here is fine. I'll just use this blank one here. But you go to insert, and remember we talked about to add a module? There's another object here called user form. So this is the user form. So if you click on the word user form here, then it actually adds another field in here called user form. And then it brings up this toolbox, and then you can click on these. There's a label, and there's an input box. I take that input box, and I can draw the input boxes like this, you see, and these are my input fields. So I can put those input fields there, and then I can put a label out here and create a label out here like this, you see. Those are the 2 fields I'm going to be using, and then I would have to put a button at the bottom here. Let me see if I can find a button here. It could be just this one here. There's the command button right there. So there's your button, and you would click that button, and you put a button there, and you can actually click on that button to execute it. This might be a yes and no type thing, see? So if you say, okay, I'm ready to submit it, click on the button and submit it. Now to run the form field, you would simply go to run, and it actually opens the form field automatically. Then you type in your information here like this, and then you hit the command button, and then it would actually go through and execute it. So, but we haven't put the code in behind it either. So that's what the input form is. Storage location is puts it in this little spot here called forms, and there's an input form right there. And the toolbox is the toolbox that pops up that we just saw a minute ago. Sometimes if the toolbox does not open up, I've had people ask me this. If the toolbox does not come up, you see it's closed off like this. When you click on these, you see it doesn't actually come up. It's under one of these, view toolbox. There it is right there. So if you close it for some reason, you can always open the toolbox. That's questions come up to me. And then of course the standard ones, we use the label and the input box. Those are the 2 we use the most. And you can see how I created this little input box here. And then properties will be located below it. And so that will allow you to change the format of that input box. So let's go back to here, click on this, and you see here are all the properties down here. If I want to make, see here's back color. So this is probably, if I put in the background color of sort of a grayish color like that, see I can change the colors like that. Let's see, enabled. Font color, if you want to change the font that you want to use. Here's a foreground color, which is, I think, the font type. Height and width of this, if you want to type in a specific value, you can make sure they're exactly the same height and all that. And these are just all the properties associated. Left justified. Some fields could be locked for some reason. And so the idea of that is value width. Yes, there's a width there. So again, these are just properties if you want to make a few adjustments to the input box. This is also important, this name. So we want to make sure we give this name something that relates to the box. if this is like a first name or something like that, then you want to put in first name there. And whatever you put in there, you're going to have to keep that track of that stuff so that you can make sure that you can use the same name over again. So that's essentially what this is. And then when you run it when you're done, and then we have to put a command button in here, and then the command button would be like send to worksheet, and then you go from there. Once you create these input boxes, you can go to the code. So if I double click on it, and see there's the code associated with that. So if I go back to the input form like this, and I want to see the code behind this box, then I can click on that button, and that tells me this is text box 2, and this is the subroutine that it created. Then I can stick my code in right there. And if I come back to input form again, if I want to see what this command button is for, I double click on the command button, and look, there's the command button right there, and then I can put in whatever code I want it to execute when I click on that command button. That's kind of how the buttons actually work. Okay? So we'll go through and we'll build that out. Let me see where we are on this. So this is what we're going to cover. Here's our, I call it Project U, user input form, step 1. And then we're going to go through and do step 2, and then step 3, and 5, 6. So we'll go through each one of these steps. We'll just kind of complete each one, and we'll make sure that each one is going to work properly, and then we'll just go from there. Okay, so let's take a look at this first one here, and you can, if you have the thing printed out or something like that, you can follow them that way. I don't think I'm going to jump back over here. I'll just see here it says full name here. So the names are going to be, we're going to create the form first there. Under the VB Project Explorer, you want to change the properties to full name, phone, and address. That property is going to be full name, address. And then we're going to go to command button and create a command button and basically put the word send to worksheet. Then this is the code we're going to be putting on here. So the command button, we're going to put this code in here to actually put these labels, and it's going to put them in specific locations. That's how that works. Okay, so we're going to start off with a, I think I talked with, I want to start off with just user input form. So I'm going to start off with those labels on the top. So let's start with a blank sheet. I'm going to close some of these off, so I'll just switch back between that one. This one off. And I'll create a new blank file. Blank. If you want to save it off so you can see it better, you can do that. Up here, we're going to put in our full name. And then we're going to put in our full name and phone and address. So here's your phone and address. Is it the right order? Yeah, so that's what we're going to start off with. That's our labels up on top. So we're going to create an input form, and we're going to start putting information below this labels up on top. So we start with just some labels at the beginning, and that way we'll write the word input form, and we'll put that input form under. Let's take a look at our VB code, and I think everybody's ready to go. So pretty straightforward at this point. Back to, this is 2 I'm on. Okay, and we can add our input form here. We don't really need a module because we're not doing any coding in that manner, but we are going to be adding in our user form. You can have code too, but that's the, so there's my book one. There's my user input form. You can rename that if you want. Looks like my toolbox didn't pop up. So if you click on the here, it should pop up. Okay, it looks like it didn't, but I'll have to load that up with View Toolbox. And we're going to create our last name, phone, and address. So we're going to click on our text box, and we can simply create our input forms like this. And you know, sometimes I've copied this, but it ended up causing me some problems. So I find it just doing them each time and then move them around. And that way they give me different names. And we need to leave some room on the bottom for our buttons. I'll just move them up like this. And this is where if you want to get these widths and heights exactly the same, and you kind of fiddle around with this, you can look at the grids there, of course, how the grids are set up. If you feel that they're slightly off, then you can go to the properties and make sure that they're exactly the same heights. So I'll come down to properties here. There should be a height parameter here, 24. So here is height of 25. And this one's a height of 24. So this one should be 24. If you want to make sure that they're perfectly the same size, then you can do it that way. Okay, so there's a little space in there. We're going to put a label out here in front. What I'll do is I'll slide them over a little bit. Right. Put a label out here. Put a label out here that says full name. And whoops. Name. I'm using, I hold my control key down and dragging it down. So in here is going to be phone. This one's going to be my address. And you want to make sure that your labels are straightened out, kind of leveled properly. All right, looks good. And now we're going to create a button on the bottom. So that's the first step, which is creating an, and then we're going to change the property names. So this one here has to be, you've used this text box one, but I think I'd make it more understandable. So if I call this full name, when I'm trying to reference this name, I can relate to it better than just text box 1 and 2. This would be phone. Name that was phone. And you can give it, you know, a sub number 2 or something like that. I'm not too concerned about the labels because we don't really do much with that. Okay, there's the address. So the labels, as you can see, they have label 1, 2, and 3, but I don't know, I'm not really going to be doing anything with the labels. So I'm only going to be doing things in the boxes here, so I'll just kind of leave those alone. So we got, now our fields are named properly. That's number 7 in the procedures. And then number 8 says we have to create a command button. So we're going to put a button down here that we're going to, so that would be this little command button here right underneath of that A. And I'll throw it there. And I'm going to put the text in there to say the word send to worksheet. To send to worksheet. So that would be my button that I would click on to actually save it, the data that I have in the form to this physical location. So it size down a little bit. I'm going to fit a couple more buttons in here too, right over here. So we might want to size it down a tiny bit. So we're going to add a few more buttons for various purposes. So right now we'll just do the send to worksheet. Step number 9 is actually the code behind the scenes. You see, so to see the code, you would click on that send to worksheet. These are just fill-in variables, is all these are. And these are the variable names down here. And then the send to worksheet is the code that's actually going to take these variable locations and save them to the worksheet. So we're going to click on this button here that says send to worksheet. And then here's the command button right there. And we could have named this too if we wanted to, but it's okay with that. So it looks like here's the code that we're going to be using. We have to put the word private sub, which is already up there. And we're going to simply say go to range A2 value and put in whatever is in the field. We want to store that to cell A2. And then we want to store the phone to cell B2 and then the address to C2. So this is the code that we're looking for. So we just copy that code out over to here. We're just going to copy that code underneath the command button. So with that command, this is what it's going to do. It's actually going to save that stuff to those physical locations. Now, you don't save it, you just kind of click out of it again, click on the user form again, and now we have a button that actually is going to do something. Now, if I do it now, it's not going to do anything, of course. But if I type in, if I have to run my code now, so if you just say, are you guys with me okay on this? Did you create your form?
With you, okay.
If you just hit the run button on this, the run button here, and run this code, it will open up the form by default, and I can type in Hutchinson. Well, I say full name is Jeff Hutchinson. This phone number is going to be 33333. Address will be 1234 Test Street. Okay, so that is what I'm going to put in there. If you send a worksheet, then it actually runs that code and puts that information on the sheet. So that's how it updates the database. Okay. That's the basics of what a form is. To understand what a form is, how to create a form, and then how to actually put stuff somewhere. Now, of course, we need to expand upon this form because we have a lot more work to do to build this database, right? So we want to add it to the bottom of the database. So that's what I go into the next step. So the next step then simply says, okay, now that's great, but now what we want to do is we're going to, for the command button, we're going to put that command button. It says cells rows, and so it's going to use a variable called row here. It's going to look at wherever the active row is, it's going to define that row 1. And then it's going to say it's always going to put it in row 1, and then it's going to put it in, it's going to add 1 character, so it's going to put it down 1 from the current position from the active cell. It'll put it down 1 from the active cell, and then it will add that information in there. It looks like this shouldn't be there. I'm sorry, this is wrong. We used the name, just full name is all we used. So that's what the code does. So it declares the code, declares the row, and it goes to range A1 select, then it says go to the bottom of the active cell, and then select the bottom of the active cell. But then we want to say whatever that row is, it's going, in this case, it's going to be 2, right? 2 is going to be the row, it's going to be 2. Then it's going to say 2 plus 1, meaning go down 1. See? Go to the blank cell below it from the active cell. So the last data that was entered in, it remembers that previous position. Right, so I'll take all of this, and I'll copy this code. I don't want to have this text on here. So I've got, click on this button here, this code in here, and we use a different name here. We just use the string. So that's what it's going to do. It's going to find the end of the cell and go down 1 and place these data out there. That's essentially what it's going to do. So this makes it a little bit more functional. Are we okay? Are we doing?
Yep.
All right. All right, so I'll type in Johnson, and I'll put in 5 and 1, 2, 9, data, street. I'll send that to the worksheet. So it takes the active cell, and it's going to put it right below it, wherever the active cell is. And it puts it like that. So the question is, if I do it again, is it going to use this active cell? And the answer is no, because it's going to go to the bottom of the list. So you think that if I typed in this and I hit and send to worksheet, it's not going to put it in Johnson. It'll actually go to the bottom of the list and then go down 1. So I send it now, it puts it below that. See? And so as I continue to put in more information here, right? And I keep adding to the end of the list. And that's why we talked about in yesterday's class about the offset and the XL down to go to the bottom of the list. And this is where it starts becoming, those commands become very valuable, because this is what we want to do with those commands, is actually find the end, find the location on the end of the database. There's always situations, what if you have a blank record or something like that in the middle? Then is it going to mess it up? Yes, and there's ways you can work around those kind of problems. But nonetheless, this is kind of the idea behind this. Then we came along and I said, get the selected record. So now I'm going to say, get the selected record. And I'm going to select a record. I'm going to put my, it says row. This is say, tell me what row I'm on. So wherever your cursor is, that's where the active row is. Then it's going to define that row here. And then it comes along and says, okay, put into this variable location the active row and the value of that row. Put in the phone, wherever the cursor is, it's going to pull that record into this form in order to make changes to it and then save it off. Now in this case, I don't think it's going to save it correctly, but we'll make a correction to that a little bit more. But I'm sort of taking a piece at a time is all I'm doing. Okay, so we're going to come into here. I'll just cut and paste it out. So I'm taking this information and I'm going to create another button out of this. You see how valuable I think this is to cut and paste the stuff. You can test it out very quickly by cutting and pasting it out. Okay, so we're going to create another button now, but this is going to be a get data. Create a button here, and I'll say get data. Oops. I'll say get data. Then we're going to go into that button. Above, here's my new button. Copy that code in there. So that's going to simply say, figure out where my cursor is and record the cursor location. And then pull this data into the variable called full name, phone, and address. So that's that. Let me click on Johnson first, and then I will run it. And it says get data, takes and pulls Johnson in there. So the problem I think I have at this point is that if I put in, if I just say send a worksheet, I think it's going to put it at the bottom because this code here just simply says find the bottom and put it in. So we have to have another button that simply says to put data or something like that. Yeah, see, it adds it to the bottom because this button here only adds it to the bottom of the list. So we kind of just take it a piece at a time here. Okay, now down here, this one here is going to, let's see if we have a put data here, see it? Where you have to get the data and then you can put it back to the same position. So this code is simply going to do the opposite of what we just did, which is to take the full name and put it to that physical placement location. So I will cut this code out and we're going to actually create another button and call this put data. Okay, so here's our get data right there. And I'll add another button and call this. There's my get data, there's my put data. Go into my put data code. And that's button 3, it looks like. And we're going to do the opposite code what we just did here. We're going to, instead of pulling the data, we're going to place the data in that specific value based on phone name, phone number, and address. So that is how that works. So let's go back and run it. And so we have, I got this test name here. So I can get the data. I can take test the name, and my phone number to 9999. That will remain the same. So that if I put that data in there, it's going to put it to the same place where you just pulled it from. And it updated. All right, so let's see what else I expanded on here. So this one here says user form. Oh, this is a command that actually executes the user form. So you might put a button out on the screen in some sort of module and add a button that says input form. And you're going to specify the user form name and the command you want to show it. This is a code you would put in a module. So there's the module right there. We're going to add a module to this, and we're going to put in this code in that module. I'll copy that out. And then we're going to create a button, and we're going to apply this code to the button, and then we can test it out. Come over to form. We're going to add a module to this. So insert module. We're going to put that code right here. So that is simply is a cut. There it is. So somehow our user form is up. Okay, so get user form, and it just all it does is it just runs this code and loads the user form and shows it. So it's just a button. So this is the command we'd use. We go over to Excel, create our button here, insert, shapes, rectangle shape. We'll call this input. Input data. I can right-click on that input data, assign my macro to it called get user form, and that will open up my user form. So I'll run that code. I can put in the thanks, and whatever it's going to be, 888, 34 thanks, road, and send that data to the worksheet. And I can change it to and add that data. It just keeps adding to the data. You can see. If I need to modify one of those things, I have to close that out and highlight one of these. Go to the RRR one, go to my input form, get my data, and then change this to Rick. Son, and I want to change the phone number, and I put that data and update that data. So that's kind of a basic layout of the system of how it works. So, you could make a lot of variations, of course, from that. But generally, just inputting stuff into the database is what a lot of people use this for. And so you just use your send a worksheet, kind of use that same code to lay it to the bottom of the worksheet. Puts it at the bottom, wherever the bottom is. And then you can go through, and there's a lot of things we can do, of course, to add a little sophistications in here, look for specific items, Any questions on that, or doing all right?
No questions for me.
Okay. You able to get it done, or did you do it?
Yeah, I was following along with you.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, I mean, I think doing it is important because now that you've done it, you can do it again, right? If you were just watching me do it, then the question whether you can do it yourself. You see that you just have to kind of make sure you fill in the right spots. And it's a little tricky because of the form input idea. There's some tricks behind the scenes there. You know, understanding this here, how this comes up, understanding the toolbox, how that pops up. If it doesn't pop up for some reason, then like in this case, it doesn't pop up. How do you get it back? There's a couple of little things there that really kind of throws people off. So just knowing that those few things are there. And most of those little things are documented in the book. So if you went back and read it very carefully, you'd see how to bring that back up, toolbox back up, and to make those adjustments.